This conference will now be recorded.
Uh, I'm getting a bit of echo. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. All right. So what we were discussing yesterday, just for the benefit of the class, so we were looking at what a tenant is, and we were looking at something called as the authorization model in Azure. That when someone signs in, how Azure kind of authenticates them and how it redirects them to something called as an identity provider or an Azure Active Directory. And moreover, we were also looking at something called as role-based access controls. So what were role-based access controls? Nothing but different permissions and etc. And we were basically going ahead and seeing what are the different kind of role-based access controls, and then we finally said what a resource group is. And I have requested everyone to go ahead and test out the resource group. So guys, did anyone face any issues while creating the resource group, or does anyone have any quick questions before we can actually start the session today? Okay guys, and also see that a couple of people are joining without giving any name. So if you can mention your names, it would be great. For example, I see someone joined with the name called Lenovo. So if you can unmute yourself and just let us know your name, it will be great.
Hi, my name
Guys,
is Ramakrishna.
all right. So Ramakrishna, when you join from tomorrow, right, please do, change your name there so that we'll know who's joining in, and, we can deliver the class accordingly. Okay.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you so much. All right. So now what I'm going to do today is that right now I am at the resource group page. So we said that you can go ahead and create I mean, there is no limit practically on the number of resource groups that you can actually go ahead and create on the portal, right? So I can go ahead and create like couple of resource groups out here, just name them, and I can also basically define them in any location. Like for example, I have one resource group, which I believe was created by Akhila in Central India region. But does it restrict me to create a different resource group in a different region? Not really. Then the question is, why do you even need so many resource groups out there? Like, is there a convention, like is there a norm for us for something like that? So not really. So what happens is something like this. So right now we have an Azure tenant, which is good enough. We have an Azure subscription, and we have one resource group that is right now in my particular subscription out here. And this one resource group is actually sufficient to go ahead and create any resource and all resources inside that particular thing. But what actually happens in the real-time environment is that you have different teams. And by different teams, I mean, let's say we have a development team who is responsible for coding and doing all that stuff. There is something called as a QA team, which primarily does one thing, which is like quality analysis. So they see what is the code quality and stuff like that. And we have the DevOps team, of course. And then we have a HR team and stuff, and etc. and etc. Now I decide that in my organization, each and every team gets their own resource groups. So for example, let's say I begin with something called as developer and QA, two different teams. So I say, okay, fine, I want two different resource groups. So I go to the portal and I say, okay, fine, let me call this as a developer hyphen RG, because this is a resource group for developers. And let me put it in the East US location. And I am not giving any tags as of now. I'll say review and create. And I created one resource group for the developers. Now I'm going ahead and creating another resource group for QAs, which is called QARG. Okay, so I have like created two different resource groups, one for developers and the other for QA. And now I want to make sure that this person, right, only is he, I mean, this person has newly come into my organization. Like he's a fresher, he's a new recruit, and this guy is with the developer team. Now he is with the development team, and I want him to only have access to this particular resource group called developer RG, and I want him to be a contributor on this particular resource group. Now, just going back to our yesterday's discussion, if I assign someone a contributor access, what they can do anything an owner can do, but they cannot go ahead and add other users out there, right? So I want this person to only have the access to the developer RG. Then how can I do it? Now, what we were discussing yesterday is that if I want to add someone, I can go here, I can go into my subscription, and I can go into something called identity and access management, and I can add someone out here. I can say, okay, fine, add a role assignment, add someone out here. But what happens is if I add someone at this level, now if I'm adding someone here, this person would have the access to dev-rg and QA-rg also, because dev-rg and QA-rg are child entities under the parent called a subscription. So a subscription here is a top level resource. And if I add someone out here like myself, I am added at the subscription level. So I am able to see all the resource groups that are in there in this particular subscriptions. I'm able to see all the resource group irrespective of whether it's a developer, it's a QA, or it's, let's say, any other resource group as such. So I'm able to have the access of all the resource groups out here. But the thing is, I don't want such a thing to happen with the developer. I don't want the developer to see other resource groups because it is none of his business, right? Very simple. So I just want the developer to look at what is there in the developer RG, add something into the developer RG, delete something from the developer RG, and only his actions should only be limited to the this particular RG. Then what is the workaround? So let's again go back to our resource groups and let's go into the developer RG. Now, as and when I go into the developer RG, on my left hand side, there are a lot of options out here. It's overview, activity, and so on, so on, so on, and a lot of things out here. All these are called blades in Azure. What are these called, guys? These are called blades. BLADES. What are blades? Very simple. They are options what Azure gives you so that you can go ahead and, let's say, play around with, let's say, your resource group or change settings on your resource group and etc. And in here, I also see something called as identity and access management, IAM or access control. We have also seen this at the subscription level also. We have also seen at this level also. And just the difference between it, if I add someone at the subscription level, they'll have access to all the resource groups within the following subscription. But if I want to add someone or if I want to control someone's access only to one particular resource group, then can I basically go ahead and add them in here? So let's see that. I'll go ahead, I'll say, okay, fine, add a role assignment. And it will now say, okay, fine, you know what, I understand there's a lot of roles. So can you select a particular role? I would say, okay, fine. Let me go ahead and select a contributor role for this particular user. And I would say, okay, fine. I will take an ID. So these are a couple of IDs that I have created yesterday. I have just gone into Gmail and created a couple of dummy IDs. So I'll take this particular ID and I'll say, okay, fine. This is the email address I want to basically invite. Now it says, you know what, the user is not there in your tenant. I'll first go ahead and invite him and then go ahead and assign him a particular role. So I'll say, okay, fine, this is good enough. Just select this and I'll say save. So firstly, Azure is going ahead and inviting the user. Secondly, it's going ahead and adding the user it's already invited. So two things. So it added the role for him. Now, how does this particular user actually view my Azure? Like, this is my Azure account. I am the administrator of this account because I myself have something called as an administrator role here. And what if this person logs in? Or rather, the question is, how will this person even log in? And how will this person even see my Azure account? So to answer that, let's go into the Gmail of that person and let's see what that person actually got. So let's log into gmail.com and let's take this ID. Let's put it in here. Let's say not now, and let's go into the ID. And as in when I go into the ID, I have an email with the name called Microsoft invitation. And if you open this out, it says, you know what, default directory has invited you within their organization, and it's telling, you know what, this particular ID, because I am like logged into this, right, this subscription, and this is my default directory out here. It says, you know what, this particular ID has actually invited you to join their organization. Do you want to accept their invitation? And as in when you say, yes, I want to accept their invitation, what would Microsoft do is that this is your first login. You haven't signed in earlier. It says, you know what, looks like you do not have an account with us. Do you want to create one? Do you want to create an ID and do you want to create a password? And this would be your ID, which is like contributor azure test at the gmail.com. And I would say next, and it will help. I mean, it'll ask me enter a password. So I will just enter a password. Okay. And it will say, you know what, I have sent a code basically to your email. Can you please give me the code? And this is how the code will actually look like. So I'm just taking the security code out here, putting it in here. I would like to receive, yes, I will take that, not a problem. I'll say next, and it will now say, okay, fine, you know what, I have a few policies that you need to accept. Just a second, let me solve this puzzle. Okay, great. Great. Now, after this is done, after let's say it's verified that you're not a robot and you're actually a human being, it'll say, okay, fine, do you want to remain signed in? I'll say no, not a problem. Now sign into the, I mean, it'll now give me a few things or basically an agreement by Microsoft telling that, you know what, you'll have to sign in with your name, you shouldn't share this password with anyone, and etc. I'll say okay, I'll say accept, and as in when I accept, it will take me to that particular Azure account. Now what did I do? I haven't logged in with this particular account as such, because this particular account is an administrator account. This particular account has all the access, meaning this particular account can actually go ahead and add people out there. This particular account can delete people out there. But I don't want everyone in my organization to have the same power that I do, because the point of authority or the point of concentration of the power should only be with a few people, right? Because just in case something goes wrong, you'll know who's doing what. Now it says as and when I log in, right? My ID is different, but I am logged into the same subscription. It's a free trial, it's the same ID. And you see, the role that I have is called a resource access. But when I log in with the administrator account, what is my role again? My role is an account administrator. And check this out, guys, the ID is the same. You have the same subscription ID, which tells you that you have essentially logged into the same subscription, but the role for this particular user that I have assigned is different. Now, coming back to the administrator account, I am able to see all the three different resource groups out there. Now, if I log in with, let's say, the user account that we just assigned, can anyone take a guess on what the user will be able to see? Guys, anyone?
Yeah, only one, that is developer RG.
Exactly. That's great. That's a great answer. So if you look at this particular user account out here, he will only be able to see this particular account called a developer RG. Now, why is he able to see only this particular account? It's because we have added that particular user as a contributor to only this particular account out here. So what can the user do really? The user can create different resources. He can go ahead and he can add different resources. but can he add, or can he basically add someone else to this particular resource group? Let's also see that. So I go with the contributor account, or I go with, let's say, that particular developer account out here, and I say identity and access management, and I try to add something. See, it's everything is disabled. Even if I go click many times, it will not give me an access to add, because I, being this particular account, I am just a contributor. I am not someone who can go ahead and add resources, and I am not someone who can go ahead. I'm not someone who can go ahead and add people. I am just someone who can go ahead and add resources. What do I mean by resources? Like, you can go ahead and create anything in this particular subscription. Like, for example, just click on something. Which resource is this? Not really essential right now, but are you able to create it? Yes, you are able to create it, because you are nothing but a contributor in this particular contributor of this particular resource group, and you will be able to basically go ahead and add things out. Now, there was some change in your team, and what happened is that this particular resource, whom we have given a contributor access on this particular resource group, also need to be a reader for the QARG. Now, why? Because most of the teams today are agile, and they basically work with each other so that they can develop a product. And this particular resource says, hey, you know what? I also need to see what the QA team is actually doing. I just want to see, that's it. I don't want to basically go ahead and change their resources. I don't want to do anything like that. I just want to see how they are really working so that I can understand, take some help from them, and I can also implement the same idea in our developer RG basically. So what I'll do is that, okay, fine, this guy has requested me. So I am the administrator. Coming back to the administrator account, I'll go, okay, fine, this guy also need access to this particular QARG, but what kind of an access does he need? He would need to be a reader, right? I'll say, okay, fine, add a role assignment right now. I have added this user. The user is already a part of my directory. I'll say, okay, fine, select the role as a reader. I'll say this is the user, contributor test, and I'll say save. And it'll say, okay, fine, you know what, adding a role assignment doesn't take a lot of time, takes about like 10 seconds, less than 10 seconds, and it kind of added. Now, if I come back to this particular incognito window, into this particular account called contributor test, if I go into my resource groups, and it will actually take some time to get refreshed, like about a minute or so. So you'll need to just refresh your screen and see what resource groups that you have access to and stuff like that. So let's give it a second, or better just log out and log in back again. Sign out and sign in back to the account again. So this was the account. Let's take that account right now again. Let's say forget. Let's put this account again. Let's put the password. I'll say no. I'll say, okay, fine, just close this out. Take some time to get reflected out here. So as and when it gets reflected, you will see an other RG with this particular username called QARG. And what was the role for this particular user? It was what? Only a resource, meaning he's just a reader. He'll be only able to see all the resources, but he will not be able to make any change on the resource. Now this takes some time in order to get reflected sometimes. Now see, after some time, you have something called as a QARG that is getting reflected under this particular account called contributor Azure test, whom we just assigned an access called QA. So it took like about 2 or 3 minutes to see this get reflected. This is just the average time for the Azure Active Directory to basically sync the entire user. So this guy now is a contributor for the developer RG and a reader for the QARG. So can he go ahead create any resource here? Let's try that again. So I'll say, okay, fine, I want to create a resource. and Azure is allowing me to create a resource. That's strange, right? But actually Azure says, you know what, you cannot perform this action without the following permission. You do not have a write permission on this particular resource group, meaning you are just a reader, so I won't allow you to create. So can I add someone in here? Nope, you cannot do that also. Then what can you do? You can just look into the resource. That's it. You can just look into this particular resource group, and you can do nothing else apart from this. You can do nothing really else apart from this. You can only go ahead and look at the resource group, but you can also go ahead and add the resources in this particular resource group. I mean, that's how we wanted this user to be, right? So this user should be a contributor because he's a developer in the developer RG. And this reader, I mean, this guy should only be a reader in the QA RG because it is not the same resource group where he belongs to. So this is how we can control someone's access. We can tell what access someone really does have, and we can see how it basically gets reflected. And this user who's like me, I have an access on the subscription, and that's the reason I'm able to see all the resources in here. I'm able to see everything that is actually mentioned in here. Guys, is this okay? Any quick questions that I can take? Did you all understand this concept?
Yeah, from user end, how can they check what kind of access they have? For example, we
So,
give read access and contribute.
right. So from a user end, you will at least need to have a contributor action in order to check that. If you are a reader, you will not be able to check. For a user end, for example, if I do this, I can again go here. I can say, okay, fine. If my name is something like, I mean, this is contributor test, right? So let me see if they have an access, because in all likely they shouldn't. Okay. So it says guest, and this is how they can check. They can
Hello.
actually go here. Yeah, hello.
Yeah. What is means as a admin we can add someone, but he has only the read permissions. He did not have any edit permissions or create permissions, right? That is the concept of this.
Administrator.
As an administrator, we are adding the sum of users.
Mhm.
He has only the read permissions only he doesn't have any edit permissions or create permissions, right?
Correct.
Okay, fine.
Yeah. So this is how you actually check the access.
Hello, sir. This is Avinash. Hello.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, Avinash.
Sir, we can also give some user as access permission, sir. Some users can access some resources and they can edit like that.
Yes, we can also basically give, I mean, this identity and access management, right? This option is there across Azure. So for a particular resource, for a particular thing, you can also go ahead and give the access user the access. We'll also discuss that when we create a resource, and we can also give a user a particular access over a resource.
Okay, sir.
Okay, so moving forward, guys. So guys, one request is that, when you have a question, please write it down so that we can take it at the end of the class, just to make sure that the others are not disturbed out there. So we can take like, one or two questions in between our session, but at the end we can, answer all the questions. So please do note down your questions. And at the end, when when the forum is open for the question and answers, you can go ahead and ask all your questions out there. Okay. All right. So one thing is that, see, I have though added this particular user as a contributor to this particular RG. But is he the only user out there? No, not really, right? Because there can be tons and tons of developers out there. There can be a lot of developers who have access to the developer RG. There can be a lot of QAs who have who have basically a contributor access to the QA RG and etc. Now there is a fear that what if one developer just comes in, he doesn't know what he's doing, he just went ahead and said, you know what, deleted this particular resource group. Is this not a big loss? Because you have like hundreds of developers who are working on this particular resource group to create a product, and one developer, without knowing, he just came in and he just deleted this particular resource group off. So don't you think this is a huge loss for the entire organization? It is, of course, right? So as an administrator, I need to protect my resources. I need to protect from my resources from what? From someone accidentally deleting them. Then is there anything that I can basically use? Now, if I go into, let's say, the RG, I have something called as locks. What really a lock means? Very simple. Why do you lock your house? So that no one can really enter into your house without a proper permission, right? That's why we all lock our houses. Now, RG right now is my house. So how can I really log this out? So if I click on locks, I say, okay, fine, add a lock. And I can say, just give a lock name. I'll say do not delete, just a normal name out here. And it says, what is the lock type that you want to put here? If I look into it, there are two types of locks out here. One is a read only, the other is a delete. Now let's talk about delete. Let's talk about read only after a couple of times after we create a resource and etc. So I'll say, okay, fine. Right now, my intention is that I don't want someone to go ahead and delete it. I'll say, okay, fine. This is applied. Now, what if I go ahead and try deleting this out? I'll say, okay, fine. See, you know what? Delete resource group on the developer RG failed because you can't delete it because it is logged. So if you want to, let's say, delete this particular resource group, you first have to go ahead and delete this lock. And this will get applied to all the users who are working on this particular resource group. So this will prevent accidental deletions. This will prevent someone from accidentally deleting this resource group and telling, hey, you know what, I'm sorry, I just accidentally deleted it. Because if you accidentally delete it, there will be a lot of resources in this particular resource group that a lot of people are working on, and everything will get deleted, right? So these are called resource locks. One of the other options that we basically use apart from identity and access management within a particular resource group. Now I am an administrator, I can assign the locks. I can also delete the locks. I can go ahead and let's say delete this lock and the lock will be gone. But for you to delete this lock, you will at least have to be a contributor on this particular resource group. You'll at least have to be an administrator or a contributor in this particular resource group in order to go ahead and delete the locks. And using IAM, the access control, you can also control who can delete it, who cannot delete it, and etc. In that way, you will be able to you will make sure that people do not accidentally delete your resources and your resources are staying safe. Now we have talked about resource group much. Like we said, okay, fine, this is a resource group. You went ahead and created a resource group and etc. You said, you know what, okay, fine, the resource group is a basic entity, meaning this is how the hierarchy is. Like you have the tenant, you have a subscription, and you have a resource group, and we have basically went ahead and assigned a bit of permissions on the resource group. Now we were also talking about the other thing yesterday, right? The basic purpose of cloud. Now, for me, the basic purpose of cloud is to store my data. Then in Azure, using what can I store my data? You use a service, or there is a service in Azure called as storage accounts. Storage accounts is a specialist in storing data that is unstructured. So again, let me repeat myself. Storage account is a specialist in storing data which is unstructured. So how does a storage account really look like? So this is how a storage account really looks like. So I just went in there and I said, you know what, go ahead and create a storage account and stuff like that. And it says, you know what, storage account basically, and the documentation itself tells you that, you know what, storage account is for storing data, especially that is unstructured. Then the question is, what kinds of data are there out there? Like when I use the word called unstructured, the next question is, do you have a data that is structured in nature? Of course, yes. The answer is yes. We have two different types of data out there. One being a structured data, the other being an unstructured data. And we are talking about unstructured data, and we are talking about a service called storage account in Azure that can actually store all the unstructured data. Then let's quickly see what structured data really is. Now, according to the bare basic definition, structured data is something that has a proper shape or a proper relation. For example, I have here a table which gives me a couple of details like, you know what, the name is Alice, email ID is Alice at this something, and the meeting time is something. So just imagine this is a organization where I have like, you know, this is not like just 2 rows, this is like 200 rows of information about people, their IDs, and their meeting time. Okay. Now, just imagine that I just have one piece of information. Like, for example, I have a meeting time and someone just gave me, you know what, can you check at 1:30 who has a meeting? Now, using this table, guys, can you check or not? You can, of course, check, right? You can do a simple query and you can see, okay, fine, at 1:30, it's John who has a meeting at this particular time slot. Meaning, this data is called relational data. Meaning, I am able to relate someone's meeting time with their email ID and someone's email ID with their name and vice versa. So I can do a lot of probability like this. So for example, if I just have the name of someone, I want to see the meeting time of them. Can I see it? Yes, I can. If I have just the email ID, can I basically pull their name and the meeting time? Yes, I can. This is called a structured data, meaning which has a proper structure which needs to be which needs to be basically stored in the form of tables and rows and etc., and which has a proper relationship. And all these structured data in Azure or in anything, right, in any cloud, is stored in something called as a database. It's stored in something called as a database, and databases are like SQL, Cosmos, Mongo, and so on, so on. You have a lot of databases that offers you to store data that is structured in nature, which is like really structured in nature. Then what about unstructured data? Images, documents, videos, photos, whatever you can think of that does not have a relationship. What do I mean by relationship out here? Let's say I have an image, let's say a random image of a person. Okay, I don't know who that person is, I just have a random image of him. Can I pull details like what is his name, what is his email ID, what is his meeting time? I mean, with artificial intelligence, yes, but without anything like, you know, I just have a photo, I am just new to the organization. Can I pull some information about them? Not really, right? I mean, I cannot really connect this particular image to any other piece of information that is present in the organization. This data, like for example, videos. I mean, you have a video, you just have a video file out there. And can you relate this video file to an image out there somewhere? If there isn't any relation, then no, not really. I cannot basically relate this out. All this data that is lying loose, like just, you know, pieces of information, is called unstructured data. And the service that you use in Azure to store all your unstructured data is called a storage account. It's called what? A storage account. And storage account is a specialist in storing all this data. Then how do you create a storage account in Azure? Next question is that, okay, fine. You need what all to create a storage account right now? Let's see. You need an account, meaning a tenant. I have a tenant. You need a subscription. I have also a subscription. You need a proper access. I also have a proper RBAC. And you need a resource group. Do I also have a resource group? Yes, I also have a resource group. So can I now go ahead and create something or create a storage account in this particular resource group? Yes, I can. How can I create then? Just go ahead and say create and say storage account. And it will take me to a marketplace. This is where, or this is Azure's Play Store, or this is Azure's App Store, where it has different services out here. published by different organizations. For example, I have something called Leap Orbit Storage backed by ACTP some appliance. It says this is published by Leap Orbit, which is a different organization. It's a third-party tool which we can basically also integrate into Azure. And there are a lot of things basically like SAP HANA and stuff like that. But I'm looking at something which is published by Microsoft. So can I also filter that? Yes, of course. So I set storage account and I can say, you know what, publisher type is not all, but Microsoft. See, you have so many things that are there in a category called storage within Microsoft. And the one that I'm looking at is this particular thing called storage account. So I am basically, it's giving me a screen where it's telling, you know what, this is storage account, and it's like similar to Play Store right now. You know, a lot of people can actually rate it, give their reviews and stuff like that, and also improvements and etc. I can say, okay, fine, go ahead and create it out. It says, okay, fine. I am presenting you a creation wizard, and there are tons and tons of options that you need to fill up. So let's see what are the options really out here. Let's see what kind of offer basically that the storage account actually gives me out. Firstly, it's asking me for project details. It's telling me, okay, fine, you know what? Can you give me the subscription and can you give me the resource group name? Because these are mandatory information because there's a star basically just beside it. I said the subscription is free trial. The resource group is called developer RG, and I go forward. Then it says, you know what is an instance detail? Now, instance is a general term for a resource in Azure, as a general technical term for a resource in Azure. So if you say it's a resource, if you say it's an instance, it's the same thing. They are synonymous with each other. Now it says, okay, fine, you know what? Can you please go ahead and give a storage account, or can you please go ahead and name your storage account? I'll say, okay, fine, I want to name my storage account. I say, okay, fine, test. It says, you know what, the name test is already taken. Then is Azure expecting a proper naming convention? Yes, of course. Then what is the naming convention? Now, guys, apart from your resource groups, all the resources in Azure that you create need to have a naming convention. Now, what is that naming convention? Is this. Your name cannot exceed, sorry, your name cannot exceed 3 to 24 character length, meaning it cannot be less than 3. What if I do something like this? Says, you know what, the field only contains lower characters in numbers, must be between 3 and 24 characters. So it cannot be beyond 3, it cannot go beyond 24. That is the very first requirement of this. Second, it cannot have special characters like spaces. Can I implement a space out here? Test account, something like this. So you know what, the field can only contain something. It cannot have special characters like @ space, nothing. No special characters allowed at all. 3, your name should be unique. Your name should be unique, meaning I cannot just give a generic name like, you know what, test account. I just cannot give, let's say, a very generic name out here, because you have to select a name, or you basically have to choose a name that is unique. Meaning, isn't this just like creating an email ID? Simple, right? It's just like creating, let's say, an email account where, let's say, you specify your etc. And Google throws you an error telling that, you know what, this email is already taken. The same applies to your resources as well. This is the name of your resource. So to be unique, let's say I give today's date, something like 1708. So is this unique? Yes, it's not throwing me an error. I'm good. So just give a name that is unique in nature and you should be good. And please don't put any spaces, any special character out there. This is the entire naming convention, what Microsoft really expects you. And if you, let's say, click on the I button out here, right? It also gives you the information. It says, you know what, the name must be unique. It must be 3 to 24, only contains lower letters and numbers. It should follow this particular pattern. Now it's asking you, okay, fine, you know what? You have created a name which is good enough. Now please go ahead and select a region that you want to create this storage account in. Now guys, storage account does what? It stores your data, right? And when you store your data, what do you need? You need something called as an infrastructure to store it, meaning you need something like a space on the server. Microsoft Azure is now asking you, you know what? Where do you want your data center to be in? Like which location do you want your data center to be in? I would say, okay, fine. I have so many locations out here. Let's imagine for a second that my business is sitting somewhere in East US. So I'll say, okay, fine. It's East US 2, what I want to select. And can I change my region after I create? No, you cannot. Once your region, I mean, you only have an option to select your region out here in this particular page before the creation of a storage account. You will not be able to go ahead and change the region after it is created. Please note it down. This is one of the important interview questions that they do ask. Like what all can you change and what all can you not change after the creation of a storage account? Can you change the name? No. Can you change the region? No. Can you change the performance tier? No. All these are strict no's out there. The first three, what you see, you cannot change it after you create it. So please be advised, you'll have to select a region out here. It says, you know what, these are the recommended regions, and there are also other regions that you can go ahead and select things out. And I will choose a region that is close to my business. I'll say, okay, fine. It's ECS2, which is good enough. Now it says, what is the performance type that you want? Like I recommend something called, for most of the scenarios, something called as a standard storage account, and you also have a premium storage account. Now, what is then the difference between a standard storage account and a premium storage account? Very simple. Standard storage account will have a server that is running on HDD, nothing but a hard drive, nothing but a hard drive that is there in most of our computers. We use this hard drive, right? So this is the hard drive what Azure provides you on a server so that you can write and read the data. Then what if you go for a premium account? When you go for a premium account, Azure gives you something called as a solid state drive, SDD. When you basically go ahead and purchase a laptop, guys, in today's market, a lot of people out there in the market will ask you, what kind of hard drive do you want? Do you want a HDD or do you want an SSD? Then what if I go for an SSD? What basically if I go for, let's say, a premium kind of a storage account? The way, or basically the data writing, see, the entire purpose of a storage account is to store data, meaning you're writing data on a storage account that is sitting in a location called East US. So your data writing and reading the data from that particular storage account, the speed of which improves a lot when you look into, let's say, a premium storage account versus a standard storage account. Fair enough. So a standard storage account gives you something called as a HDD. So the data writing speed is less when compared to a premium storage account. But a premium storage account has a lot of limitations. What are those? We'll discuss that a while later. A premium storage account has a lot of limitations. So 99% of the customers of Azure go for something called as a standard storage account. And the data writing speed is less, yes, but it is very marginal. You will not even feel the difference. But for clients who are like, really adamant that, you know what, we need a premium account because we need something called as a solid state drive out there, they will any which ways go for a premium account out there. And you can also basically click on this performance and it says, you know what, determine what kind of an account do you want, whether a premium or whether a, standard. You can also say learn more out here. Like when you click on learn more out here, it will take you to the Microsoft documentation and it'll tell you, you know what is a premium, what is, let's say, a standard, how can you read the data, what is the SLA that I offer, and all that stuff. So anytime that you're confused, click on this button, go to this particular learn more option, and it will take you right to the Microsoft documentation. And you will have this I button everywhere you see, like throughout the portal, you'll have this I button out there. Okay. Moving on to the next option, which is called redundancy. Now, what does really redundancy mean? or also called as replication. Now guys, imagine you have created, let's say, a storage account out there. Okay, let's say in East US, you have put a lot of data. Imagine you are basically you are a hospital organization, and you are a very big hospital, and you have a lot of clients, and you have stored all the data of these clients in the storage account, like in PDF files or in Excel files and etc. You have stored all these things in the storage account. Now let's say there is something happening in East US. Let's say a natural disaster, or let's say the entire data center has been shut down. Then where is your data? Will you not ask this to Azure that, you know what, where is my data if something like that happens? Do you guarantee something? Azure tells you that, you know what, you should have selected some option from my redundancy. And I offer a lot of things like LRS, also called locally redundant storage, ZRS, also called as zone redundant storage, GRS, called as geo redundant storage, and GZRS, which is a very new offering called geo zone redundant storage. Now, what is this? What exactly it offers? Let's give it a quick glance. Now, if I create my storage account in LRS, what's going to happen? If I create my storage account in LRS, I'll have one data center, which is in East US, and I'll have 3 copies of my data on 3 different servers within the same data center. Now, as we earlier said, a data center, right, can have a lot many servers. It can have thousands of servers. So what Microsoft is going to do is that Microsoft is going to pick up 3 different servers in your data center, and it's going to replicate your data, or rather copy your data on 3 different servers. What kind of a copy is this? It's called a synchronous copy or a synchronous replication. What really do I mean by synchronous? Meaning, in the time when you just write your data, you'll have 3 copies of it created right away. Synchronous, happening at the same time. This is called synchronous replication. And what does Microsoft really give you? Microsoft gives you something called 99.9 times 9 kind of an SLA. Meaning, out of every 100, your data is going to be available at 99.99999, so on to 9 times. This is, let's say, the promise what Microsoft gives you. But our question is that, you know what, if the data center goes down, then what is the option? Microsoft says, you know what, I have another option called zone redundancy storage. In a zone redundancy storage, if you select a zone redundancy storage, and if the region supports the zone redundancy, I will create 3 copies of your data in 3 different data centers. So just in case, if your one data center goes down, you will have data center 2 or data center 3 from where your data can be streamed, or where your data can be available. So you don't have to worry about it. Meaning, there are 3 different zones in East US, and I'm talking about the same geographic location, which is East US again. So 3 different zones in East US, and I am going to create 3 different copies in 3 different data centers out there. And I'm offering an SLA of 99.99 to 12 times out there. There are a few customers who are really ambitious. There are businesses that are really ambitious, really even worried about this model. What if the entire zone goes down? Microsoft says, okay, fine. I also have an answer to that, which is called geo redundancy storage, GRS, where I will not even give you, let's say if you're creating you're creating a storage account in East US. I will give you 3 copies, meaning I will do an LRS in the primary data center. And I will take your data and put it in a data center that is sitting in West US, which is altogether another geographic zone. And I will also do a replication out there. I'll also do an LRS out there. Here I am giving you a 99.16 times 9 availability, which is the maximum that I can give you. So according to, let's say, the money that you have, the budget that you have to create a storage account, because LRS is the most cheapest form of a storage account that you can have, and GRS is the most expensive. and according to, let's say, the budget, and according to, let's say, the requirement that you can have, you can select any one of the redundancy options that are available from the portal. Any one of the redundancy options that you can basically go ahead and select this out. With that, I'll put a pause onto this class and I am ready to take questions. And when we meet tomorrow, we can discuss more about storage accounts and how to create storage accounts, what you get when you create a storage account, and etc. So guys, now is your time. Please go ahead and ask whatever questions you have. I can go ahead and answer things out.
Hi, Kiran, Chandra here.
Yeah,
So
hi Chandra.
we added the access to the individual IDs, Gmail IDs to the resource group.
Mhm.
So can we add a group in Active Directory group to the respective resource group?
Yes, you will be able to add it. You will need to firstly create an Active Directory group and then add that particular group out there. So everyone who's a part of that particular group will have access to the resource groups out there.
Okay. So in real time, the Azure is giving free for Active Directory, correct? For the organization.
So again, Active Directory is again a big concept altogether in itself. So Active Directory also has something called premium licensing. Right now with a free account, you get something called as a free license for Active Directory. Like if I look into the Active Directory, right, this is called a free license that I'm using right now, AD free. You also have AD premium and etc. So depending upon the license type that you have, you will also basically have the limitations like the number of users, the number of MFAs that you can do and stuff like that.
Okay. So we can create in the group here in the portal.
Active
Portal.
Directory, yes, you can.
Okay. From
You
there we
can,
can add it to the resource
yeah, you
group.
can add it to the resource group directly. Just like you add you had a user ID, right? You can add the group in the same way.
Okay. So the resource Active Directory name is domain name is by default. Can we change it to something
Yes,
else?
you can change the domain, but you need to have a premium license for changing the domain. So
Okay.
right now this is a default domain. You can also do a custom domain out there, but you need to have a premium licensing for that.
Okay. Okay, got it.
Okay. Guys, any questions?
Roles regarding apart from contributor, reader, and admin, are there any other roles?
Yes, there are actually a lot of roles apart from contributor, reader, and admin. Like if you click on this, right, and if you let's say add, you say role assignment, and there are tons and tons of roles apart from this. Let's say I'm talking about storage account, okay? I want to only give someone the access to the storage account. I can also look for a role called storage account. So I have something called storage block contributor, storage data owner, reader, everything. But normally all the roles fall under these three heads. So these are all the roles, all the RBACs that Azure offers you. And you also have a facility to go ahead and create a custom role out there. Does it answer your question?
Yes, Kiran.
Okay, great. Guys, anything else related to storage accounts? I mean, did you all understand the data types we were talking about? The structured, unstructured, and the replication models?
Hello, I just want a clarification that resource group is used to store the resources and storage account is used to store the data, right?
Correct. So resource group is just a collection of all the resources. So it's just like it's just like a drive in your computer. Whereas the storage account is the actual resource that is used to store, let's say, the data.
Okay, thank you.
Storage account is not fall under resource.
It does, but that's what it doesn't fall under a resource group. It's not a resource group, it's a resource.
Okay, so it's a resource, right? So we can add it
It's
to
a
the
resource.
resource group, correct?
Yes, that's what we did just now, right? I mean, you need a resource group initially to create a resource.
Okay.
In storage account, we are not selecting whether it is a structured or unstructured, right? How it
No,
is
so the
segregated?
thing is that when you also look at the documentation, right, Sanjay? When you look at the documentation of the storage account, it itself tells you that what I am let's say a specialist in storing unstructured data. Like so, it is by goes without saying you can store unstructured data in it. So you do not have to upright select whether the data is structured or unstructured. It just assumes that you are storing unstructured data in it. Does it answer your question, Sanjay?
Yep.
Anything else, guys, regarding replications? Anything? Any questions here?
Hello, sir. This is Avnash.
Yeah, Vinash.
Hello,
Yeah, Vinash, go ahead.
sir. You said the data is stored in different locations. Hello,
Mhm.
our
Yeah, yeah.
data
Mhm.
in storage is like synchronous manner, like similar to as server RAID configuration, sir. That is also.
Correct. It's similar to the server configuration. Yes.
Okay, that is the doubt. It is in server that is in different RAID configurations. You can say that 0 to 6 is there.
Right.
Hello.
Yeah.
For
Hello.
this,
Yes.
how this is processed, sir? This means
So
like
yeah. So see again, that is the biggest difference between let's say a server model and a storage account out here. Now, a storage account is a managed service by Azure, meaning you
yeah.
can only have a certain amount of control telling that what is your region, with which type of a replication is it. Everything else is taken care by Microsoft. You don't get to say, you don't get to have a say in it.
Okay, sir.
So
That is my
they are
doubt.
managed services. Yes.
Regarding redundancy or application, can we
Mhm.
change? We can change it right afterwards if client decided
Yes.
we need to change it.
Yes, you can go from LRS to GRS. You can come back from GRS to ZRS. You can change it after you create a storage account. So you cannot change the name, you cannot change the location, and you cannot change the performance type of the storage account. Three things that you cannot do after creation.
Okay. In real time, will client will provide the which one we need to select, or
Sorry, but
we
I'm,
need to
I'm getting
decide?
a lot of echo. Avinash, can you please go on mute if you do not have any questions? Thank you. Yep. Yeah, Sanjay, please go ahead.
Uh, uh, in real time, will client will let us know whether which one we need to select, or we need to decide ourselves? It should be LRS, ZRS, or GRS.
No, in the real time, right? It's either going to be your client or it's either going to be an architect who's going to decide what is the type of a storage account. So it again completely depends upon the business and also the amount of money that you're investing into it.
Okay, you mean if I select ZRS or GRS, it will be cost compared to LRS.
Yes, it is costlier when compared to LRS, and if you create GRS, it is more costlier when you compare to ZRS. So
Okay,
the more
okay,
the redundancy, the more the cost.
okay, got it. Thank you.
No problem. Guys, any more questions in there?
So we cannot select these replication types. Only client will select replication types, right?
No, client will tell us what the replication type is. We can select the replication type accordingly.
Okay.
So we can't select the replication by our end due to the client requirement only we can select, right?
Let's say you are in an in-house project, okay? So it's not always that the client, let's say you are in an in-house project where you are just working for your own company. The project is just for your own company. So in that case, one of your seniors or the architect is going to tell you what kind of redundancy that you can go for, and you can select accordingly.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Uh, so if there aren't any more questions, guys, can I go ahead and close this session today?
Yes.
Great. So what I want you all to do today is this. Please go ahead, create couple of resource groups, create a couple of dummy accounts, and assign different kind of access to them and see how you can see them in the portal. Like log in with different accounts and see how you can log into the portal and read about the different replication types of a storage account. just go to the storage account and browse through the pages, see what are all, let's say, the options that are available out there, and just try to read about it. So that's the assignment for today, guys. And we can meet the same time tomorrow, that is 8 a.m. to 9 a.m.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys. Have a great day ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.